Color-coded those notes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Monticello for Kids live stream. We're so glad you could join us again. My name is Laura, and I work at Monticello. Here's a picture of the beautiful west lawn of the home. And I work there as our continuing education coordinator. And we're really excited to have you with us today. If you've joined any of our other live streams this week, you know that we have been talking about the gardens at Monticello. So here's a glimpse of those flower gardens, and Thomas Jefferson loved gardening and loved experimenting with plants like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So Thomas Jefferson was a great scientist in addition to his many other accomplishments. And what we're going to be talking about more today is the vegetable garden. So that is what we are going to dig into. You might have been able to join us a couple weeks ago when we talked about Jefferson growing peas and competing with his neighbors. And I got to go up to the vegetable garden a couple of days ago while observing social distancing and being really careful. And one of our vegetable gardeners gave me some of the peas that are already growing in the vegetable garden for us to see. So I'll zoom in and we'll remove that screen share for you. And so here are the pea pods. And then inside are the peas growing. And so those look awesome. Those are a recipe we will save for another day because we need a lot more peas. But what we're going to do today is make a recipe that Jefferson would have enjoyed. And some of you might have a sneak peek at what we're going to be making today if you solved the clue we gave you on the cipher wheel. So if you know the answer to this clue, go ahead and share it with us in the comments. And if you have any questions throughout our live stream or you want to tell us where you're watching from, we would love that too. And if you already know the answer, go ahead and share it, but the rest of us are going to see if we can figure it out too. The answer to the code is a type of lettuce that Thomas Jefferson grew at Monticello, and is also the name of a piece of sporting equipment. And it's a sport that you play with rackets and a net. And it is a small neon green item that is fuzzy. Maybe you have some at home to play with. Maybe your dog has some at home to play with. My family dog likes to eat all of the fuzz off of these. So if you've found the answer, you let us know in the comments and we will get it up on the screen. But the answer, I will go ahead and tell you, is tennis ball. And that is really the kind of lettuce that Jefferson had planted once a week from February 1st to September 1st every year. And this is a picture of tennis ball lettuce. You can see how it's really, really tight and really bright green like a tennis ball. So that's why it is called that. And we are going to be using some different kinds of lettuce that Jefferson enjoyed and that are already growing in the vegetable garden this time of year. So we have a lot of beautiful Dutch brown lettuce that we're going to use in our salad dressing recipe. And it's got this beautiful pattern of dark spots on the leaves. We're going to use some escarole, which is a little stiffer and hardier, and it's got fun curlier leaves. And we're going to use some Silesia lettuce, which is something I hadn't heard of before. And it's a little smaller and brighter than the Dutch brown, but leafier than the tennis ball. And you can see that these are fresh out of the ground because they're all covered in dirt, and they have plenty of dirt inside the leaves. So of course, the first step is always being ready to cook. That means clean hands, which I don't have anymore now that I've touched all of these lettuces, and having all of our ingredients ready to go. So the recipe we're going to make today is one that Jefferson enjoyed. It's a version of one that we shared many years ago in a book called Dining at Monticello. And we'll put that up on the screen for you now. And a way that it's special, in addition to using all of these lettuces, is that it uses a lot of the herbs that grow in the gardens as well. So we'll be using those too. So this recipe is really easy. It is just vinegar, oil, salt, pepper, greens, and herbs. So we're going to use all of these greens. I have already washed a bunch of the leaves off of them so that you don't just sit here and watch me wash lettuce. But we'll enjoy flinging off a lot of the extra water with the salad center, because this is such a fun task for a lot of different members of your household to enjoy. Little friend, younger friends can join, adults can help. You can all work together doing this. So we're going to add lots of greens, and I'm not going to make a very big salad because it's just me. And I don't want to waste food. But cooking is something that's a lot of fun while we're at home. It's always a lot of fun for me, but it's extra special while we're at home and taking care of those that we're quarantined with. And Jefferson really loved vegetables as part of his cooking, or what he liked to eat. He said he preferred meat as a condiment. And let's spend some time thinking about what estimating meant for gardening at Monticello. So this is a thimbleful of lettuce seeds. And these seeds are so small that they fit inside a thimble that you would use for sewing. And these seeds are just itty bitty. Can you imagine, instead of just filling a thimble, counting how many seeds there were? That would take forever to plant them every week. So instead, he instructed a thimbleful to be planted. And this was useful for lots of different things. And one of our favorite activities at Monticello is using this estimating to take guesses. And that's part of what a good scientist does, both in a garden and in a kitchen. So if you have a guess of how many beans are in this jar, go ahead and tell us, how many beans do you think are in the jar? And we'll share the answer a little later on. So in addition to adding all of these beautiful lettuces to the salad, and this escarole is nice and crunchy, we're also going to add some herbs from the vegetable garden. And you can use whatever greens that you can get right now. That's the best part about this recipe, is it's really flexible. So into the salad itself, I am going to add some beautiful fennel fronds. These are the tops of what are going to become a big licorice flavored vegetable later in the season, but their tops are an excellent flavor too. You'll want to have a grown-up cut something big like this. And so we'll add those in. And the instructions are, for every 6 cups of greens that you have, you would want 1 cup of herbs mixed into your salad. So I usually use parsley. I've got some mint from my own garden in here, which is struggling a little bit in the rain that we've had here. Lots of rain last night. And then our vegetable gardener, Pat, also gave me some lemon balm from the gardens. And it's got a nice light flavor. Later in the summer, I'll do plenty of basil to add. I'm going to pull these leaves off and cut them smaller too. Now, as fun as it would be to imagine Thomas Jefferson being the one cooking all of these different dishes that he enjoyed, Jefferson was not the cook of Monticello. We have a guess that Emma thinks there were 200 beans in the jar. No, there are more than 200 beans. Oh, we have another guess for 700. That's closer. There are still more than 700 beans in the jar. So we'll keep guessing. Now, the salad dressing I'm going to make in a jar because I like to shake it instead of having to whisk it forever and ever and ever. And it's fun to shake a jar around. So We've also added herbs into the vinegar for the dressing. And this involved an herb that I've never heard of that Pat taught me about. Oh, Vivian thinks there's 1,000 beans. Vivian is very, very close. So let me tell you about these herbs, and then I will give you the answer to how many beans are in the jar. So Pat gave me some summer savory to use in the dressing. And this is kind of like marjoram or oregano. It's milder than rosemary. And so I crushed up some of that and added it in here. And then she also gave me a sprig of thyme that I have sitting in water so that it'll grow roots and I can plant it at home in my garden. And I added some of that too. And it's been sitting in the vinegar all morning to flavor it. So we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of that. All right, Lakota guessed 1,005, and I will tell you, and I didn't count them myself, but I'm trusting the coworker who did count them. There are 1,039 beans in the jar. So that is how many are in that jar. So instead of having to count the beans every time, you could estimate how many fit in a jar to save seeds for the next season. So we've added our 2 tablespoons of the herb vinegar that's got all of those good flavors in it. And then I'm gonna add 6 tablespoons of olive oil to have the right proportion. So there's a lot of math to learn in here too. Now we were thinking about who did the cooking at Monticello. Jefferson loved the gardens. He loved learning about food. I'm gonna lose count talking and measuring at the same time, but we'll see what happens. But it was an enslaved man named Wormley Hughes who took care of the vegetable garden. And then in the kitchens, early on in Jefferson's life, it was 2 men named James Hemmings and Peter Hemmings who were the chefs that Jefferson had James Hemmings trained in France. And then later on, an enormous kitchen was built when Jefferson expanded Monticello. We'll show you what that looks like now. And this is where 2 women named Edith Fawcett and Frances Hearn prepared all of the dishes in Jefferson's retirement years. So this is an artist's imagining of what that might have looked like. And these women were cooking for Jefferson's family and guests, not their own families in this space. And it was a really state-of-the-art design. But being enslaved by Jefferson meant that they did not have a choice in their work or where it took them. When Edith Fawcett was trained at the White House, she had to live far away from her family for those years. And so this was not labor for their own happiness, but instead working for Jefferson. And that is part of the history of Monticello, is how unfair this was for these very talented women. And all of this food was served up in the dining room. So when you think about Jefferson and food, you can imagine him in this beautiful space enjoying all of these different dishes, including macaroni and cheese, vanilla ice cream, waffles, and French fries that he learned about while traveling. Joy shared that we usually get to see the kitchen when they go on their field trip to Monticello. That's right. I love the kitchen there. It is one of my favorite spaces. And that's part of why I'm so excited to cook at home with you guys today. So all we're going to do to finish off this recipe is add a teaspoon of salt and some pepper. And then I'm going to put the lid on and shake it up. It can be as simple as that to make a Jeffersonian salad dressing. But we can make this even more historic. Oh, so we want to repeat some of the names of lettuces that were Jefferson's favorites. So we know he loved the tennis ball lettuce. And then today we're using the brown Dutch lettuce from the garden, the escarole, as well as the Silesia lettuce that we know he planted in 1810. And that's a new one for our vegetable gardeners this year. Now, when we're thinking about food from the past, we also want to think about, where did we learn all these recipes from? Who wrote them down? Jefferson wrote down one or two. The enslaved chefs, James Hemings, wrote down a couple, but many of them came from women in the past. And so we're going to learn about some of them. But I also want to know what you guys are trying to cook at home while you're staying safe and healthy. What's something that you've tried to cook? So let us know what you're cooking at home in the comments while we take a look at where these recipes came from. Now, Jefferson's daughter, Martha Jefferson Randolph, was in charge of running the household while Jefferson was retired. So she was, in many ways, the overseer of the home. She was the one giving instructions to the enslaved chefs most of the time. And she had a cousin named Mary Randolph, who wrote one of the first cookbooks in American history. And so she wrote something called the Virginia Housewife, or Methodical Cook. And this is how we've learned a lot about what was served at Monticello as an extended member of the family. It was first published in 1824, 2 years before Jefferson died. And she has a little bit of a variation on this salad dressing recipe that really reflects the mixing of cultures that was happening. One of Jefferson's guests described the food at Monticello as half Virginian, half French, served in good taste and abundance. Oh, Monica's been making salsa. That sounds awesome. And so this mixture of flavors, that half Virginian part is really a mixture of African influences from the enslaved community, Native American ingredients as Europeans come to North America, as well as all of the English influences of Jefferson's heritage. Tony has been making clam chowder. That sounds amazing. So to add to this recipe, Mary Randolph also used some herb vinegar. It originally calls for tarragon, but the tarragon's not growing yet. And, oops, a small mustard explosion. That happens sometimes. So we've substituted in other herbs from the garden already. So that's ready to go. And she adds a teaspoon of mustard, which I'm going to estimate instead of measuring. We use those Jeffersonian practices. She adds a teaspoon of sugar so that that mustard's not too strong. She adds a little more vinegar, and I'm going to use the plain vinegar so that the herbs aren't too strong. This is white wine vinegar, but again, it's all about substitutions and estimating and experimenting, so you can add whichever you prefer. And then she takes 2 hard-boiled egg yolks and adds a tablespoon of water to them. Let's see, there's my tablespoon measure. And she mashes them down and mixes them up to add to the salad dressing. And so I'm going to mash these up, and I'm going to make sure that you guys know that you can add any questions that you have for us in the comments. I'm seeing some other answers come in for what folks have been cooking at home. Some really exciting flavors happening. I've made some bread and some really good pasta. Roasted a chicken this week. That's one of my favorite things to do. All right, so once this egg yolk has been smoothed out, it goes in with the rest of the salad dressing. This is a very French influence that mixes with all that traveling and experimenting that Jefferson was doing. And now we can just shake it up again once we've added all of these extra ingredients. Told you this was the fun part. All right. So I'm just going to drizzle a little of this over the herbs and greens that I put into my bowl. And then Mary Randolph instructs us to decorate the bowl with some scallions. You remember, some of you might remember that a couple weeks ago I told you I was regrowing green onions in a little bit of water. So that's what I'm using now. These are new ones that I've regrown. And so she says to decorate with some green onions or scallions because they are, she said, the most delicate of the onion tribe. So just a light onion flavor. They smell really good. And then to decorate with the whites from the onion, or from the eggs that we used the yolks in the dressing from. And I'm going to add a little more salt and pepper on top. Oh, we see we've got a question that comes in. Did we already mention some of the flavors of ice cream that Jefferson served? Yes. So Jefferson wrote down the recipe for vanilla ice cream that was served at Monticello, but supposedly Dolly Madison's favorite flavor of ice cream, and she was a frequent diner at Monticello, was oyster ice cream, which sounds absolutely terrible. What is my favorite lettuce? I don't know that I have a favorite. I like a mix of spinach and arugula most of the time, a little bit of sweet and a little bit of spicy. So that brings our beautiful salad all together. Toss it together with some tongs and serve it to your family and friends that you are sheltering with, or you can bottle up some of your dressing. It's already ready to go in a jar. Share it with a neighbor, safely leave it on their porch, and find a good way through food and science and experimenting to support your friends and neighbors in this time. And we have a few other things to support you all as you learn at home. So if you follow the link that we'll put at the bottom of the screen, you can find this map to learn more about the vegetables that Jefferson had in the garden. You'll find the recipe that we started with, as well as some more fun facts about the garden on this next page. And if you want to keep track of what you're experimenting with and what you've observed, there is a Monticello observation journal that you can use for your own. And this is a sample of what that can look like when you're done. So those are all there for you. And Mary Randolph's Virginia Housewife was published so long ago that that is all over the internet ready for you to use. And so you can explore those recipes if you'd like as well. Be prepared for some very French amounts of butter and cream. They're not all as healthy as this one, but a lot of fun. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope you can join us next week. We're going to be talking about what learning at home meant 200 years ago at Monticello. So thank you and have a great day.